Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Nominate Heritage Award. My name is Ryan Coons, and I am a Folklife Specialist, and I have the privilege of administering the Heritage Award, so I am a one-stop shop for all questions that you might have. Some grounding slides and introductory slides before we get into the meat of today's webinar. We are using Google Meet today, and I have here two screenshots of the features of Google Meet to remind you about this particular communication platform. A couple of things I'd like to highlight for you. You'll notice in this screenshot here the microphone on-off button. If you are not actively speaking in any given moment, I do ask that you please keep your microphone off so that we can preserve the fidelity of this recording that we are capturing today. Also, you'll notice here the closed caption icon that you can toggle that on or off. Please note that those closed captions are created by computer. They are not created by humans, so there's always going to be the possibility of some accuracy issues with those punches. Here's an additional shot of some of the features. If you need to toggle the screen layout, or if you're encountering some video and or audio issues, there is the three vertical dots button, more options that will take you to a menu that can help you with that. And I'll also note that the chat function in Google Meet, unlike other communication platforms, is public for everyone. There is not a private chat feature in Google Meet, so anything anyone puts in there will be visible to everyone. At all public-facing MSAC events, we like to begin with a series of grounding slides to reintroduce ourselves to you, our constituents, and our audience. And following the best practices of accessibility, I will read them out loud. MSAC's Land Acknowledgement Statement derives from the MSAC Land Acknowledgement Project, in which staff consulted communities and paid them for their time. You can find more information on the Land Acknowledgement Project, on land acknowledgement statements, tribal histories, land maps, glossaries, a whole slew of different resources available free for the public on our website, msac.org. And the statement that the home of its first peoples: Panic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Choctaw Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waters to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. Our equity and justice arts celebrate our state diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals. The Maryland State Arts Council, which I will abbreviate hereafter as MSAC, and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Our vision is that MSAC plays an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And our mission is that MSAC advances the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. Our current strategic plan has 5 goals. I will read just the bolded text here, and you're welcome to read more about that on our website, msac.org. Our current 5 goals are to increase intentional support, to build capacity, to leverage connections, and to bolster Maryland arts. We invite you to engage with us using a series of creative meeting actions. They are to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, to engage with everyone's presence as a gift, to acknowledge that together we know a lot, to enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, idea and trust that it will be heard, to use I statements, such as I think or I feel, to focus your language on the task at hand, to hold one another accountable with care, to apply yes and, such as I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and to balance speaking and listening. MSAC makes available a variety of professional development opportunities, and of course today's webinar is one such. We also have a variety of topic-specific sessions that might cover, for example, financial management, legal advice, and many other topics, as well as a series of virtual and in-person events across the calendar year that include our Coffee with the Council, Creative Conversations, in-person regional office hours, where across about a 2-year period, we visit every part of the state to hear from constituents directly, as well as the annual Maryland Arts Summit. We invite you, our constituents, to get involved with us. We quite literally cannot do this work without you. And we invite you to consider applying to be a panelist, a program editor, and or a juror. I will note this is always paid work, and we're fortunate to be able to pay some of the highest rates in the country for this work. Panelists evaluate applications and award nominations. Editors help us improve our public programs, and jurors, for example, adjudicate the Poetry Out Loud program. Again, this is paid work, and the application is made through our online grants management system, Smart Simple, and I will be sharing more information about panelist work a little bit later. But you can find more information on that at our website, msac.org, under the About menu in ways to get involved. This is a roadmap of today's webinar and where we're going to be going. We, of course, already have had the grounding slides. I will then provide you with an overview of the Heritage Award program, discuss how to make a nomination, provide information on the technical support that we make available, discuss nomination strategies that we recommend folks consider. And of course, there will be time for question and answer at the end. I will invite you to pop your question into the chat box as it occurs to you, or if you prefer, you're welcome to hold on to it and wait until we reach the question and answer session. And I look forward to fielding your questions then. We'll talk over some next steps as a gentle reminder of what comes next, and then close the webinar. I will note that the photographs that you see here on this slide and on any slide in this presentation are all of previous Heritage Award winners. These are photos taken by MSAC's media contractors over the years and are available for public access at the Maryland Traditions Archives, which is housed at UMBC, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, in the Department of Special Collections with MSAC oversight. And they're available to you as a public resource. I hope you will consider accessing them. But in the meantime, enjoy them. I will say they do a good job of kind of painting a picture of the broad range of traditions that we've had the fortune to support through the Heritage Award over the years. Without further ado, the Maryland Heritage Awards function is to recognize long-term achievement in the traditional arts. And when we say traditional arts in-house, MSAC, we mean community-based living cultural traditions that have been handed down by example or word of mouth. And I'd like to give you some examples. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch. We most often think of performance-based traditions. Of course, these include, for example, dance, footing, music such as gospel singing, storytelling such as storytelling traditions based in neighborhood or ethnic or regional traditions like the Baltimore Black storytelling tradition. We're also talking about things like theater such as puppetry. Living cultural traditions handed down by example or word of mouth might also involve or might also feature material traditions such as costuming like Lumbee regalia making, or craft such as blacksmithing, food traditions such as maple syrup making, textile traditions such as the Baltimore album quilt tradition, or visual traditions, among them painted screens of Baltimore. Perhaps most unusually, especially when compared with other MSAC grant programs, the Heritage Award also makes available funding to what we call occupational traditions, again, living cultural traditions handed down by example or word of mouth, that are engaged in some kind of occupation. And this could include, for example, agricultural traditions such as kitchen gardening, or our architectural traditions such as the now former Sparrows Point Steel Mill, which won a Heritage Award, I think just a few years before it was decommissioned, actually. But we're also talking about things like land-based traditions, such as indigenous relationships with land that go back thousands of years, such as the 2024 Pocomoke Indian Nations Pocomoke Homelands Heritage Award. We're also, of course, given the Chesapeake Bay and our many rivers in the state, referring to things like maritime traditions, such as the Waterfowl Festival on the Eastern Shore. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a smattering to give you a bird's eye view of some of the types of traditions that are eligible to receive the Heritage Award. Heritage Award can be nominated within 3 different distinct categories: the person or people category, the place category, and the tradition category. As you consider your own Heritage Award nomination, I will note that the person or people category is the most difficult one, just based off of the volume of nominations we receive in that category. It is the most competitive. Place and tradition tend to be a little less competitive, but no reason to change the nomination category, just a brief note there. When we talk about nominations within the people or person category, we're referring to folks who achieve whose long-term achievement within the traditional arts might relate to their artistry or their community leadership, possibly also their creative practice. Maybe they're excellent documentarians and have been documenting a tradition. Maybe they are entrepreneurs within a tradition. 2024 Heritage Award winner Angel Rivera of Frederick is an excellent example of this. He and his daughter own and run the, to my knowledge, only Puerto Rican distillery in the mainland United States outside of Puerto Rico. Again, an excellent example of entrepreneurship there. People or persons might also be nominated because of their work within traditional arts presentation, or their work in performance or research, or a combination of these different categories. Any and or all of the above, or a combination thereof. When we talk about place nominations, we're referring to locations that might achieve long-term prominence over a period of generations, and we'll talk about that time period component more deeply in a moment. We're also talking about places that might serve as gathering spaces for community fellowship, or places that serve as the Art Social Club in Baltimore, Maryland is an example of all 3 of these, and many place nominations will check all 3 boxes, but again, might only check 1 or 2, and still be a very strong nomination. When we talk about the tradition category of nominations, we're referring to things like traditional practices or reoccurring events, occupations, local knowledge, cultural movements, organizations. The photograph you see here is from, I believe, the 2018, maybe 2017, 2019, somewhere around there, Heritage Award that went to the Puerto Rican traditions of bomba and plena, a dance and percussion set of traditions. You see the bomba tradition here. An excellent example of one of many different types of eligible traditions. I mentioned earlier that this is, of course, long-term achievement within the traditional arts is what the Heritage Award is recognizing. And I want to say a brief note here about this phrase, long-term achievement. We often encounter folks who think that long-term must always refer to some distinct concrete number of years. And that is not the case. We are instead looking for long-term achievement as defined within a very specific context of that tradition. And I'd like to give you 2 highly contrasting examples. We've been fortunate to award the Heritage Awards a number of times to a variety of tribal landscapes. I believe 2014 was the first with Piscataway homelands. We've also been able to award it over the years to the Akahanik homelands, Nasuewash Band of Indians homelands, and again in 2024 to Pocomoke homelands. Of course, when we speak of tribal relationships with land, those are relationships that are measured over periods of thousands of years, right? That's a large time scale. Contrast that with another tradition that we've not had the privilege of awarding the Heritage Award to yet, but is very much eligible to it, the tradition of Baltimore club music, which has only existed for a handful of decades, maybe 3 or 4 decades at most. That's a very different time scale, right, than literally thousands of years, and yet both are eligible to receive the award. And if we were to see a strong nomination in Baltimore club music, that might be, again, a few handfuls of decades for the DJ or for the dancer or for the producer or for the tradition that is featured within that nomination. That does demonstrate long-term achievement within that context. And that's what we're looking for, a context, tradition-specific time measurement, and not some time that doesn't connect with the tradition itself. Funding for the Heritage Award, each of the 6 awardees receive $10,000 each. And that funding is unrestricted, meaning that the awardees can use it for quite literally anything they want beyond the few things that any MSAC grant may not be used for, notably no political contributions, no lobbying, but quite literally anything else besides that. Awardees are welcome to use the funds for whatever they want. We do not track that. We don't even need to know about it. But again, it's for the awardees to use as they like. Payment can be made to individual Maryland residents and or to Maryland-located nonprofits, colleges, universities, and or units of government. So lots of options there. This is a timeline of this current cycle of the Heritage Award. The nomination publication will be next Monday, August 26th, and we will be accepting nominations until Friday, October 11th. Panelists will review the nominations in November 2024, and nominators and awardees will be notified in January, and funds to awardees will be processed in February. And of course, because it's a grant, there's always going to be a final report. Final reports are designed to be a light lift. I tell folks to try not to take more than 45 minutes to an hour maximum, and the deadline for that in this current cycle is August 15th, 2025, a year from now. We've talked about the different types of traditions that are eligible for the Heritage Award, and I'd like to speak a little more generally about eligibility. The person, place, or person or people, place, and or tradition that are being nominated must be resident or located in Maryland. And I'm phrasing it that way because many folks sometimes think, oh, it's the Maryland Heritage Award, it has to be something from Maryland. And when you get down to it, from Maryland would restrict the award to just tribal peoples. And as much as we want to continue making the award to tribal peoples in their homelands, a wide variety of traditions are eligible who have come or that have come to Maryland, this place called Maryland, more recently through practices and traditions and movements of migration, of diaspora, of emigration. They don't have to be from Maryland, they just have to be located within Maryland. The tradition itself might also exist diasporically. For example, I keep going back to Puerto Rican traditions within Puerto Rico, within the diaspora that can be located in Maryland and New York and New Jersey and other parts of the Americas, and not just in the US. But because they are resident here, because that diaspora has a presence here, they are and have been eligible to receive that award. Any single recipient may receive the award only once. However, there is no limit to the number of nominations connected to any single tradition. And I'm going to go back to that Puerto Rican example, where this year we were fortunate to award to tradition bearer Angel Rivera, who is Puerto Rican and maintains a variety of Puerto Rican traditions. And a number of years ago, I believe in 2018, we also awarded it to the Puerto Rican traditions of Bomba and Plena. Again, Puerto Rican traditions, but Bomba and Plena can no longer receive the award, and Angel Rivera can no longer receive it because they already have. We do accept self-nominations. We do not, however, accept posthumous nominations. So if the person is deceased, if the place is no longer used for that particular tradition, then they are not eligible to receive the award. I will note that while the nominee, the person, place, or tradition being nominated have to be resident in Maryland, the nominator can be located quite literally anywhere in the world. We welcome nominations from folks living outside of state, as long as the nominee, the person, place, or tradition, are resident in Maryland. Within the process of moving from nomination through to award, we rely very heavily on panelists, as I mentioned during the opening slides of this webinar. And panelists have kind of a two-part process that they go through. They have an at-home review. This is an independent review of all all nominations that panelists review, and they create scores for each application, for each nomination. And then there's a virtual public panel meeting during which the panelists meet. Members of the public are welcome to attend. Nominators, nominees are welcome to attend, as well as unconnected members of the public if they are so interested. That information is posted on msac.org. I believe this particular panel meeting is scheduled for December 17th. My apologies for not including that on the slide earlier. But during that panel meeting, panelists will discuss each of the nominations. They will then go back and review their scoring and comments and potentially edit them based on that discussion. And we then use their final scores to come to funding decisions. So again, we quite literally cannot do this work without panelists. The nomination itself is a combination of narrative text-based responses as well as supplemental materials. And I'll talk more about the supplemental materials in a moment, but they can take multiple formats. They can be text, they can be former letters, they can be audiovisual materials, a variety of different print media. The world's your oyster. Narrative components relate to and ask the nominator to discuss the cultural history and community of origin of the tradition being considered, as well as the current community participating within the tradition. And those two, the community of origin might be the current community, it might not be. They might be two distinct, probably related communities. The nomination also requests the nominator to discuss the nominee's importance to that current community participating, and to give examples of and to demonstrate the nominee's sustained engagement with the tradition, or that, with that form of folk life. Finally, the narrative components also ask the nominator to describe how receiving this award would provide a direct benefit to the culture of origin. So again, the culture of origin and that cultural background is quite an important part of the Heritage Award nomination. And strong nominations are able to communicate those connections. I mentioned supplemental materials. These are not required, but we strongly recommend that nominators include these materials, especially because the rest of the nomination is a text-based thing, and often the cliche, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is quite accurate, that by including pictures or videos or letters of recommendation or print media that relate to the nominee, by including those, you are able to paint a much broader, clearer picture with a modicum of materials, right? So we strongly recommend, but do not require, supplemental materials. To make the actual nomination, we recommend that you begin with the grant guidelines. This particular screenshot is of the Heritage Awards program page, which you can find on msac.org. You can see here the menu route that will get you there: homepage, programs, Maryland Traditions, Heritage Award. And you'll see the two blue arrows on the slide here. The upper one points to the yellow quick resources box. You will find this box on every single program page on our website. And within every one of those quick resources box, you will find a link to the PDF of that particular grant's guidelines. And I share this information because pretty much any question that you could possibly have should be answered within those guidelines. I will warn you, they make wonderful bedtime reading. You'll fall asleep very quickly, but hopefully your answers are easy to find and answered quickly there. So we recommend starting there. Information included there includes the grant schedule, contact information for myself and my colleagues should you have questions, as well as all of the questions you are expected to answer within the nomination, information on tech specs for the supplemental materials, and perhaps most importantly, you can find in there the rubric that the panelists themselves will be using to adjudicate the nomination. Very, very important component there. We make it very easily accessible. This is a screenshot of that wonderful bedtime reading. Again, it's not the most exciting thing, but it's designed to be as exhaustive as possible. So again, please, if you have any questions, happy to answer them and recommend that you start within the grant guidelines. To make the actual nomination, that occurs within MSAC's grants management software entitled Smart Simple. You can find a link to Smart Simple at the top of any MSAC website page. Just go to msac.org. Signing up for our Smart Simple account is free. And if you don't already have an account in Smart Simple, you can register using that register button. You'll see two red arrows on the slide pointing to that button. And again, registration is free. And once inside, on your grantee dashboard, you'll see a variety of things. The two red arrows here are pointing to funding opportunities. The actual number there is 11 here, but will definitely change over time as grants open and close. And beginning on August 26th, 2024, it will open and include the Heritage Award. That was where you will find it. You will be able to click through and make the nomination, upload materials, and submit. I would like to remind you that MSAC makes available a variety of technical support as you work on your nomination. Technical support really runs the gamut of what you need. And that could include, for example, me reading a draft of your nomination prose. It could differently look like a conversation before you actually put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard keys to discuss nomination strategies or the narrative that you wish to tell, the story you wish to tell through this nomination. It could look like both. It could look like both several times over as staff capacity allows. So again, I invite you to be in touch, ask questions, and take advantage of our technical support, which is, again, available to you. I will say quite explicitly that part of our paychecks as MSAC employees, as state employees, and as public servants goes into us providing this kind of technical support service to you, our constituents. So frankly and bluntly, make us earn our paychecks, and please be in touch with your questions. I'd like to transition into some nomination strategies here. These are recommendations that we and my colleagues have come up with after reviewing a variety of different cycles of the Heritage Award. And we observe that stronger nominations tend to follow these strategies. So take that with a grain of salt, but we do recommend these. First, that recommendation is to write your nomination for panelists who know nothing about your tradition. Now, we are fortunate to work with a variety of panelists who are themselves often tradition bearers or somehow involved in the folk and traditional arts. Some of them are master artists in their own right. But the sheer volume, thankfully, the sheer volume of different types of traditions that come before panelists in a Heritage Award panel are so diverse that it's quite impossible for any one person to be an expert in all of them. And as much as we would like to be able to populate the panel with experts in all of the traditions, we have no way of knowing what the sheer diversity before the panel will be until after panel has already been chosen. It's just not possible on our end. So as a result, we recommend writing the nomination for folks, assuming that although they are of average or above average intelligence, that they might know nothing about your specific tradition. So again, that will save you a lot of time. I also mentioned, of course, earlier the supplemental materials. They are recommended, they are not required, but we recommend that you do use them specifically in order to provide panelists with a taste. Again, going back to that cliche that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And again, if you're writing for panelists who know nothing about your tradition, the supplemental materials can provide that taste of what the text refers to. And please feel welcome to do something, for example, statement of fact about the tradition or the tradition bearer that you're nominating. See, for example, page 2 in the supplemental materials, a letter of recommendation from former student so-and-so. You know, that can save you some time within the narrative portion by referencing the supplemental materials, and the two can play quite nicely together to form an overall very strong nomination. And finally, of course, I've already discussed our technical assistance. The final nomination strategy is that you do access that technical assistance, and not just once. Don't view technical assistance as a one-time resource, but rather as something you can access multiple times. As capacity allows, I'm happy to read multiple drafts of your nomination. I do ask for about a week's lead time, just given everything else on my plate. And again, happy to read as much and provide as much support and as capacity allows. So again, please be in touch and take advantage of this technical assistance. Final nomination strategy is that we recommend that you apply to be a panelist. The deadline to apply to be a Heritage Award panelist is August 30th. Today is August 20th. There is still time to do so, and we've heard from a number of folks who do the work of panelists that by seeing what it looks like on the back end, the adjudication process and going through so many applications, they find that they are able to themselves then go on to become stronger grant or Heritage Award nomination writers themselves. So consider doing this, consider doing panelist work as professional development for yourself. And as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, this is paid work. The amount of money depends on the volume of nominations or applications, but it is in fact, again, some of the highest paid work in, some of the highest dollar amounts in the country. And depending on the volume of nominations can run anywhere from $3,000 to about $1,000. It roughly averages around $400 to $800, given the volume of nominations. I am your point of contact for any questions regarding the Heritage Award. My contact information is on the slide here, and should you need it later, it is also available on our website, msac.org, along with the contact information of all of our staff. We try to make ourselves as available to the public as possible. I'd love to take your questions now. Please feel free to pop them into the chat, or if you prefer, you're welcome to use the raise hand function there at the bottom of your screen, unmute yourself and ask your question. Yes, Allison.
Hey, Ryan. The project that we're working on is kind of a combination of a person and a particular tradition. Unfortunately, the person has passed away. Do you think it still would make sense for us to apply using more of the traditions lens, but
That's what I was
incorporating?
going to correct. Yes, if the tradition is still represented in the state, but that particular tradition bearer is deceased, and my condolences there, I could see a potentially strong nomination in the tradition category. Yes.
Right. And would you recommend a fair amount of the work in the tradition is around this particular person? Obviously, I'm guessing that, it would be advantageous to show the breadth of this tradition outside of this one person, but do you think it would be okay within the application to speak about this person as sort of a catalyst for the project?
Given what it sounds like the role of that individual is within the tradition, yes, I think that is probably necessary. Yeah. But especially given the fact that they are deceased and you would be nominating a tradition as opposed to an individual or group of people, I would recommend maybe gesturing towards them, explaining the work that they've done, but the bulk of kind of the meat of the nomination would need to, in order to make it a strong nomination, would need to focus on the broader tradition. But of course, any nomination of a tradition could potentially refer to the work that is done by folks who are now deceased, right? Especially since the goal is to demonstrate long-term achievement, multiple generations of achievement within the context of the tradition. So it's entirely probable that there are going to be folks who are deceased there. So that the fact of their deceased does not make it ineligible. It just means it might require some wordsmithing there to make the narrative coherent.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. And please be in touch with further questions, or if you want to chat one-on-one, or if you want me to read a draft. Other questions? Yes, Jill. Jill, if you're speaking, I cannot hear you. You are still muted. Jill, I think you're still on mute.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, wonderful. The technology is working.
Sorry. You probably said this already. When is the deadline this year?
October 11th.
Uh-huh. Okay. And I think you've answered this question for me before, but I'll ask it again. Do you tend to get more applications for traditions or for individuals?
Oh, definitely hands down for people. The people person category is by far the category that is most nominated. That does also mean, folks, and I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, that the place and tradition categories are therefore less competitive. So might be something to strategize around as you consider
Yeah.
who, what, or where you're nominating. Yes.
So in the case of a tradition, the criteria you're deciding, how do you decide what tradition is more deserving of being recognized than another?
So that is not the criteria, and I can actually share with you briefly, if you'll give me one moment to pull that up. The grant guidelines, by the way, for the current cycle have not yet been posted. They're going to be posted later this week. But for folks who want to get an advance start this week before the cycle opens, the previous cycle's grant guidelines are still available, and the nomination questions have not changed. And let me go in here. So within the tradition category specifically, panelists are going to be adjudicating whether the nomination clearly identifies a living cultural tradition strongly, that is connected to a cultural community of origin over a generational period of practice. They're going to be adjudicating whether the tradition is important, they're going to be adjudicating whether the nominee's importance to the folk life of a cultural community of origin is clearly demonstrated. And they're going to be adjudicating whether or not the nominee's engagement with folklife clearly extends over a substantial period of time. Those are kind of the three main criteria: the amount of time, the connection to community of origin, and the identification of that form of folklife or that tradition. So I hope that answers your question, Jill, and thank you very much for asking it. I also see in the chat that Jeff added his thanks, and thank you very much, Jeff. I'm glad that you have found this webinar very helpful. That means that we're doing work that we're supposed to do, and I thank you. Other questions? We have plenty of time if folks want to ask questions. The typical recommendation for online conversations and webinars like this is to wait for 10 minutes to see if anybody else asks a question or sings out, and that was about 15 seconds. So without further ado, we will move right along. If you have a question that occurs to you after the webinar, I hope you'll be in touch. Again, my contact information is available online at msac.org. As a reminder of the next steps, we have a call for panelists open until August 30th, and I hope you will consider that. Again, it is paid work, excellent professional development, and we hear from folks that by doing panelist work, they often improve their own grant writing skills. The nomination period, that is the period during which we will be accepting nominations of the Heritage Award, is August 26th through October 11th. The panel process itself, the panelists will be reviewing the nominations in November with a panel date set for December 17th, and winners will be notified in January. And I note a question in the chat from Svetlana. Hello, Svetlana. Glad you found the presentation so informative. We are not able to share the slides, but this presentation will be posted on MSAC's YouTube page, frankly, as quickly as I can receive the recording and get it to my colleague who does that work. I expect it to be up by tomorrow at the latest. And it is meant to be a public resource that folks can refer back to. So look for it there, and I'll also be emailing a link probably later this week to folks who signed up for and attended the webinar based off of the Eventbrite. So thank you very much for that question. Thank you again very much for attending today. If you are not already signed up to receive MSAC's email communications, I strongly recommend you do so. This is really the first place, hot off the press, where you will hear notifications that grants have opened and are now accepting applications, that awards are open and now accepting nominations, also email communications regarding a variety of professional development opportunities and other artistic opportunities available to the arts sector in the state. And you can sign up for that newsletter and email communications at the URL on your screen, tinyurl.com/MSAC's mailing list. And please note that S, MSAC's S, I'll spell it out, MSACSMAILINGLIST. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And again, if you have any questions or if they occur to you later, I hope you'll be in touch. And have a wonderful afternoon.